Joining us live now is retired US Army Major Mike Lyons. Mike, good to see you. Thanks for your time this morning. So we'll start with that available evidence when it comes to that attack on a Gaza hospital. Who do you think was responsible?
Well, when I was a cadet at West Point at the United States Military Academy, we were taught that first reports of war are usually not correct. And I think that's what we're seeing here. We saw the initial report last night that showed a large number of casualties, an Israeli airstrike. And you look now as in the sunlight, and you could see that based on the evidence, based on what happened on the ground there, it wasn't a 500-pound bomb. It wasn't a 2,000-pound bomb. It was a smaller crater. And based on the evidence that everyone just saw there, it does not appear that looked like it was an airstrike. The evidence does show that based on radar that's coming from the United States, that looks like that rocket was fired from behind the hospital and part of other rockets that were fired at the same time, and that one fell short. This is an enemy that doesn't have great weapon systems, and so they have this kind of system that fails every once in a while, and that's likely what happened here.
Well, I mean, that is the key piece of evidence, isn't it? It's that small crater. I mean, like you said, they're 500-pound, 2,000-pound bombs. We've seen what happens when a big Israeli bomb lands in Gaza. It causes a huge crater and widespread destruction, but as the gentleman from Sky UK pointed out, the cars there have barely shifted. I mean, they've been blackened out, but they haven't been thrown about. They're still in that same spot, which indicates that the explosion was quite small.
And the fact that it doesn't look like it hit the hospital itself. If you had 500 casualties there, that hospital would have collapsed. We've all seen the pictures of some of the bombings that Israel has done already in Gaza City. I mean, they have flattened certain places that are beyond repair. You could tell those buildings that came down there. You didn't see that there. So again, without the hospital being collapsed, I just don't know how they come up with 500 casualties for this.
Okay, yeah. So you're skeptical of that death toll as well.
Yeah, it just doesn't pass the red face test on any level. And again, we have to rely on an enemy, and from Israel's perspective, that has put these kind of things out before, so it's not likely the case.
Okay. What about this other item that we just played, the audio that the IDF claims it intercepted of Hamas operatives, basically owning up to the attack? Now, as we know, these days audio can be doctored quite easily, so people can be naturally skeptical of them. Is it real in your view?
And that's interesting that they released it, because now it shows capability that Israel has around listening in on what's going on there. So I'm surprised they released it, because I think the physical evidence on the ground is enough as it is. But I think that they're sending a second message, and that is that we're listening. We're listening to what's going on in Hamas, and we're listening to what conversations are taking place. So while that conversation seemed a little bit off, let's face it, it didn't seem to be in part of a combat zone. It does show that Israel is now getting human intelligence back inside of Gaza City and places that they hadn't had before. So it's showing a capability, and I think that's the real message here.
Yeah, right. But I mean, monitoring phones is pretty easy, right?
Well, I think they've had a challenge with it. I think that had they been paying attention, they would have seen certain indications of the attack that would have taken place 10 days ago. So I don't think they did. I've talked to people that said that it's been shut down over the past few years, that Hamas had been much better at protecting their communications.
Hey, your president, Joe Biden, he was not on the ground for very long. He was able to have a win of sorts and able to set up a humanitarian corridor, if you will, through Egypt. About $100 million US worth of aid as well. Yeah, not on the ground for very long, but was it worth it? Was his trip there worth it to be there in Israel with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
I think it was a high-risk operation from the very beginning, bringing a U.S. president into a combat zone like that. The ground war obviously wasn't going to start anytime soon with him there. They weren't going to invade Gaza. I think normally in those situations they have agreements already laid out, and he's taking victory laps is what normally happens. But it looks like there was a lot more pivoting. We saw the other meetings canceled with the other leaders in Jordan and in Egypt. But I do think overall it did send the right message that the leader does have to go on the ground there. We just have to see what's going to be the result of this. I don't think Israel's stopping. I think this is a slight pause in the tactical operation to try to let civilians and the like out of there. But I still think a ground incursion is coming. I think they're going to attack the tunnels. Who knows? They might flood the tunnels. I think that they're not done with what they perceive to be this threat coming from Hamas.
What about the delay in doing that, though? I mean, wouldn't it be best to have done it already, to catch Hamas on the hop? Or is it best to wait it out, strike from above, try and pound the underground tunnels as much, to try and clear the booby traps before you go in? What's the right approach?
Well, I like the wait, and I like having been someone that I was in an assembly area for 35 days in Desert Storm prior to us attacking. That favors then the attacker. If you wear down the defender at this point, because they had the initial advantage, they likely had defensive positions prepared. But if you kind of strike away and bomb away at those, I think over time they get worn down. They have logistical problems themselves. They've shut off the water. They have food issues. So, no, I think that Israel Defense Forces has used this time to train, practice, prepare, rehearse. And while they will likely go in the next coming weeks, I think it's been their advantage to continue this onslaught from the sky.
And just finally here, Mike, the hostages, what do you think their chances of survival are?
Well, I think that's the reason why then they haven't launched just yet as well. I think they're giving that every possible moment. In fact, if there's one thing I did take from that meeting with the president and the prime minister was that seems to be more of a priority right now. There might be a certain time where they feel they have to go in on the ground, because I do think if they go in on the ground, then the chances of them surviving is going to be much more difficult. So I think they're giving them every chance to survive right now before any kind of ground incursion.
That is Mike Lyons, a retired US Army Major. Mike, appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much.